Hi, this is David Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, we're excited to have you along. And if it applies, do not forget to subscribe, share, comment, and like. There you go. Got all that down. And I've got a special dedication this week. Sponsored by some 11th graders from Yeshiva Or Shmuel. Finkelmans, Aryeh Schmidt, Aaron Onano. I hope I'm not pronouncing this right. Onauna. I apologize, Aaron. I'm sorry. Aaron. Nona. Yitzi Horowitz. That was nice and easy. Shua Bacharach and Eliyahu Zell. Oh, I send money through you sometimes. We're all fans, some crazies, Baruch Hashem, of the show, and listen every week. We hope this sponsorship will inspire more like it. That's right, there are a lot of classes out there that really should be sponsoring with us. Shout out to our friends and classmates, Moshe Nocham, Isra Epstein, and Shalom Nyman. Now, full disclosure, I don't know if this is Neiman or Nyman. It's written like Neiman Marcus, but it might be Nyman. This episode is also sponsored by Lili Nishmas Aaron Nosson ben Moshe Shimon and Chaim Dovid ben Yitzchak. P.S. What do you think of the TYH movement? I assume that's Thank You Hashem. It might be Torah Youth Hebrew program. I don't really know. I'm guessing it's Thank You Hashem. I'm not familiar with it when you say in terms of a movement. I guess what you could be saying is a movement where people get together to give hoidah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How could I be against something like that? It's like coming out in favor of tooth decay. You know what I mean? It's a no-brainer. And anyone who wants to get involved in something with a thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, gosh, what could be better than that? I think that's wonderful. Hodu LaHashem ki tov, kilam chasto. The Dalit Parshios. There's always in the Dalit Parshios, I think, an inherent question that I'm going to illustrate, but I'll illustrate it in a circular manner. And again, I don't mean to criticize. I'm not a critical person by nature, but I think it is interesting. Just to explain. When I taught in Discovery, so they have a class called the 5 levels of pleasure. The idea is that the 5th level of pleasure, which is the lowest level, is physical pleasure. The 4th level is love. The 3rd level is meaning. The 2nd level is power. And the top level is Avas Hashem, being close to Hashem. And I read the whole outline, and I sat through the class many times. I heard Rav Noach give it. I heard other people give it, and nobody seemed to be able to explain, at least in my opinion, well, 2nd level pleasure, power. Until then, it always works. You see that people will trade money for love, because to have children, for example, is more expensive than not having children. So I'm willing to spend my money for love. And yet, people will encourage their children to go to war if they think it's a worthwhile cause, even though they might get killed, because they're willing to trade love for meaning. So those make sense. But people are willing to trade meaning for power. And I remember the way Reb Noach said it was, you can see this in the negative, how people will give up all meaning in order to be able to get power and what they'll do, etc. But that doesn't really prove it. Who says that a person will give up love and meaning for power? Somebody might, but it's not an automatic. It's not something you see necessarily in nature. I've heard it explained many times. I was never happy with the explanation. And the first level is Avas Hashem, that the infinite pleasure being close to Hashem is right. When Matti Berger used to say this over in his God class, he left out that level. He would go from physical pleasures to love, and from love to meaning, and from meaning to Hashem. You know, The second level is very hard to understand. So I always like to know what I'm saying, where it's coming from. In fact, I'll tell you an interesting story. There was a class in Discovery called Outside Verification. The nickname for it was called Pig, Fish, and Moon. So they would point out that it says that the pig is the only animal that has split hoofs and doesn't chew its cud, but maybe there are others. They've never found another one. So that's a raya that the Torah, you can see. By fish, brings the Mishnah that says that if it has scales, then it definitely had fins. So even if you find a fish and it's just the top of it and you don't see the fins, but you see the scales, there's no fish that don't have scales that doesn't have fins. And he says, and they've searched and they found hundreds and hundreds of different types of fish. They've never found a fish that has scales and no fins. They've found fish that have fins and no scale, but not that would have scales and not fins. And the third one was the Sod HaIbor, and they quote the Rambam, the Sod HaIbor, showing the exact time of when the moon would appear, and how could they possibly have known this number to this exact time, the Chazal, when the amount of time that the moon goes around the sun. So my brother-in-law, who is much more educated than I am, Rabbi Dovid Lichtman, he went to college and everything. He was teaching in Discovery, and they gave him the outline to this class. And he showed them articles that the ancient Greeks knew the amount of time it took for the moon to go around the earth. And they had the same number that we had already. So they took it out. I remember one of the people who taught this class said, I always felt there was a problem with this class. And they removed it because you don't want to teach something that you know is incorrect, because what happens when you get caught? Yeah, it's like the little kid playing chess, and the person says, if you move that, I can take off your queen. And the kid says, I know. I was just hoping you wouldn't see it. That's no way to teach a class and teach something that you know is wrong. So they took that out at that point. So it's always good to check the sources and see where everything comes from. So I hear this, and who says? Where is this all coming from? So it turns out it's from Sefer Chinuch. In Ve'eschanan, Ve'ahavta Hashem Lekecha, on the mitzvah of Avas Hashem, I looked up the Sefer Chinuch. So it comes from the Sefer Chinuch. And it says, the way you get to Avas Hashem is by knowing that it's greater than Mammon, Banim, V'chavod. All right, so Mammon is fifth level pleasure, which is physical pleasure. Banim, children, that's love. And Kavod, that's meaning. And that's it. There is no power. I looked up 3 Sefer Chinuch, 3 different editions. Nobody had anything else written. I finally opened up the English Sefer Chinuch, and in the footnote on the bottom it says there is a girsa that says Memshala, but that was obviously a mistake. So there's only 4 levels of pleasure. It really has to be rebranded. I brought this to their attention, and they were like, yeah, okay. But when I teach it, I obviously, I teach that there's only 4 levels, because there is no 5th level, there's no Memshala. That's why it was so hard to explain. Lahavdu elef avdolos. We have the 4 parshios. Shkolim, Zachar, Para, and Chodesh. I can explain most of them. Yeah. Shkolim is based on the Gemara that says that Haman gave a large sum of money to Achashverosh to buy Klal Yisrael in order to destroy him. As the Gemara says, there was never a bigger koine umakne at that time. That was the biggest transaction. He bought the Jewish people to have a right to be able to destroy them. So Shkolim, I understand. So when he comes and he has to dress Mordechai up, he says, your Shkolim came before my Shkolim. And therefore, before we come to Purim, we give our Shkolim to be able to counteract the Shkolim of Haman. There's a lot more to say on it. But at least I understand what it's doing there. And we read it on, if Shabbos comes out on Rosh Chodesh or on the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh. Why? We have to start collecting the Chatzi Shekel and Chodesh Adar by starting Rosh Chodesh. So we announce it in Shul that we read this parsha that everyone should know it's time to get your half shekel ready and make sure that you give it. Right? Okay. Zohar is pretty obvious, and that is before we destroy Amalek, we read Zeicher Amalek, what Amalek did to you, how they attacked you, so that we can go out. And in fact, before Shaul goes out to fight Amalek, Shmuel HaNavi reviews what Amalek did and recall their crimes, so that when we go to fight them, we understand why we're doing it. Fine. And then we come to Purim. Those two are before Purim. And then after Purim, we read Parshas Parah. Why? Because we're coming now to Pesach, and you have to metaher yourself to bring the Korban Pesach. You have to be metaher. And it's a process. It's a week-long process. You have to go to the mikveh and then get spritzed with the mechatas, which is, of course, the red heifer, which is burnt and reduced to ashes, and a little bit of those ashes are put into water from a natural spring, and then you put in a piece of hyssop and you spritz it on the person. So that has to be done on the third day, and then again on the seventh day, and goes to the mikveh, and then he's taha. It's a 7-day process. So we're telling everybody, get yourself into a situation of tahara, you have an obligation. I understand that. The last one is Parshas Chodesh. And I've never really heard a good explanation for Parshas Chodesh. So they said, well, because we're about to do Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and so we want you to know that a Chodesh Hazeh Lachem, Rosh Chodeshim, and you should start counting this month. Okay, so what am I reading Parshas Chodesh for exactly? What is it that I'm trying to bring across with this parsha? It's true. HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, Rosh Chodeshim, we start counting from Nisan. The nations of the world basically start counting time from Tishrei. We do it from Nisan, and there's two different methodologies. Obviously, Machlekes, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, whether the world was created in Nisan or whether the world was created in Tishrei. We celebrate Rosh Hashanah in Tishrei, and we say this is the day of creation. And of course, the Ran says, if it was created in Nisan, then what's Rosh Hashanah? He gives a whole explanation. We've talked about it in the past. But why is it necessary in the Dalet Parshas to read that there is a parsha called Parshas HaChodesh to tell me that Nisan is the first of our time and first of our months, etc.? So, I want to talk about this a little bit. In our Purim podcast, we talked about time and the idea of moed, etc. But I want to try to take it from a slightly different perspective, if I can, as we read Parshas HaChodesh, and with that, we finish the Dalet Parshiyos. And this is different from the fact that time obviously has a beginning and has an end. It puts it in a different context, and let me explain what that is. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim va'aretz. That's how the Torah starts. And Rashi right away says, why did we start from Bereshis? Why didn't we start from HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim, which is the first mitzvah? What about the mitzvah at Mora? What about the Gid Anosha? What about Piri V'Rivya? What about Shav Mitzvah Neinach? Okay. But for the Jewish people, what the first mitzvah that we get, that we're starting with, that isn't repeated later on like the other mitzvahs are, is HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim, that you will tell about Rosh Chodesh. And in fact, HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to Moshe with a nevuah. It has to be during the day, so it's in the twilight when the new moon is there. And he says, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, pointed with his finger so you can see what the new moon looks like, to be able to be Mekadesh it. This was very important. So Rashi says, why was this here? So he gives an explanation. Ramban gives a different explanation. But you see that there's some sort of a connection between Bereshis bara Elokim and HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. Because Bereshis bara Elokim means in the beginning. The first word of the Torah is an allusion to time. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu created time and space within which the world would exist. Bereshis, in the beginning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Shemayim va'aretz. He created space and time. That's how the Torah starts. The Torah starts with a creation called time. What HaChodesh HaZelochem comes to teach us is that we are in charge of time. That we run time. I was speaking once, there used to be, Ruvain Subar had a program on Fridays in English on a defunct radio station here. And I used to speak about the Parsha. It was a lot of fun. And there was a lot of people listening at the time. Kol Simcha, the radio station was. And one week he was running very, very late. And I remember it was Parsha's Bo. And it was Mamash, there was only 5 minutes left of the show when he came to me. Because I don't know what happened. He had a long interview, whatever. So he says, Rabbi Orlofsky, what do we learn from the mitzvah of a Chodesh HaZelochem? I said, it teaches us that Jews are out of time. And he says, what does that mean? I said, it means we're out of time. Have a good Shabbos, everybody. Now, I thought that was incredibly clever. One of the people who listened, of course, was Mendel Weinbach, who was my boss in Or Sameach, and he was not happy. I thought that was a great joke, but he didn't like it. You know, he was very concerned, partly for Or Sameach and partly for me. There used to be a big evening of Shmiras HaLashon for women, and I was the speaker. And one year, when it was taken over, when the original people ran it, apparently they felt I was too controversial to put up. They would have me speak in the local day programs, but they didn't want me on the big Kenneth because, you know, they were worried what I might say. So when it came under new ownership, so he made me a speaker, and Baruch Hashem, I got a very fine reaction. I'll never forget, they said everyone should speak between 35 and 40 minutes. So the first speaker spoke for an hour, the second one spoke for an hour and 20 minutes. I spoke for 37 minutes. And it was very well received. And people afterwards said to me, why did you speak so short? I said, you're asking the wrong question. Why did everybody else speak so long? So after that, more or less, the fellow who was running it would consult me on which speakers to bring in, and etc. And he said, look, I want to bring you in again, but I just had you as a speaker this year, so would you MC? I said, sure. He says, this way I get to advertise that you're going to be there, and, you know, I'm not, you know, I'll use you as a speaker every other year, but I'd like to use you as the MC. I said, my pleasure. So Mendel called me up when he saw the ad, and he said, it's not lefi chvodo to be the MC. And I said, Rebbe, I said, if I can be mechazek this event in any way, it's my privilege. And that's it. And I told them, I said, if they need me to sit at the window and collect the tickets, I'll do it. If they want me to clean up the hall afterwards, I'll do it. Anything I can do to mechazek this event, I think is extremely choshev. And, you know, worry about my COVID. Moshe Feinstein used to give a shir, Erev Shabbos, and afterwards everybody ran out because they were late. You know, it was Erev Shabbos, a lot to do. And Moshe Feinstein was very short. And all the lights in the Beis Medrash were pull strings, if you're old enough to remember when there were lights with pull strings. And he took a chair and walked around the Beis Medrash to pull, because he couldn't reach it, to pull each string to be able to turn off the lights. Everybody ran off. And we didn't worry about his COVID. Wasn't a problem of that. They used to say at the MTJ dinner afterwards, he would go in the kitchen and thank the staff for what a wonderful job they did. Yeah. So he felt that this was, for me, it was unbecoming to make a joke like that. I happen to think it was one of my best. But Mendel, what can I tell you? I appreciate the fact that you tried very hard to try to up my game. But in any event, what does that mean that the Jews are out of time? What is this connection of the Jews to time? So the Gemara says an amazing thing. He says, "HaChodesh hazeh lachem rosh chodeshim," and the Gemara gives an example. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the Malachim, "Set up the heavenly court. Tomorrow is Rosh Hashanah." And so the Satan comes in. He's the prosecutor up in Shemayim, and the defense attorney, the Jewish people, Michael, is there, and they bring the books of all of the Sefer Zechronos, of all the deeds. They have everything set up. And they're waiting for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's not there. So one of the Malachim flies up to the Pargod, to the curtain, knocks on the curtain, says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're waiting for you to start. And he says, yeah, we'll do it tomorrow. He says, pardon? He says, yeah, based in Shalmata, the earthly court has decided to make Elul 30 days. So tomorrow is Rosh Hashanah. So he said, but you're God. He says, when it came to time, I gave that power to the Jewish people. The Jewish people decide time. And the Gemara Rosh Hashanah tells an amazing story where Rabbi Gamliel, who was the Nasi, said, this is Rosh Hashanah, this is going to be the date. And so, of course, 10 days later will be Yom Kippur. And Rabbi Yeshua made his own calculations, and he thought that Rabbi Gamliel was off by a day. And so he decided he was going to, I'll keep both days Yom Kippur as a suffix. And Rabbi Gamliel got wind of this. Now you have to remember, this is after the Churban. This is Rabbi Gamliel of Yavna. And the survival of the Jewish people dependent on everyone coming together. Otherwise, you'll break into a bunch of sects. And in fact, as we know, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, you had the Tzadukim, you had whoever it was who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, you had the Essenes. There were all kinds of different little groups that existed and were fracturing off. And that's why when the Machlekes was finally decided between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, they forbade anyone from following Beis Shammai anymore. And that's where Rabbi Tarfon said, I lay down to say Kriya Shema like Beis Shammai says. Now don't get me wrong, Beis Hillel also says you could lie down. They say you could say Kriya Shema in any position. So I was being Yotze both Shitas by lying down and saying Kriya Shema, and I almost got killed by thieves. And the Mishnah says you deserve to die for following Beis Shammai. But even Beis Hillel says I could do it. He goes, I know, but you're of such a stature that if people see you doing this, it's going to destroy Klal Yisrael. Can't have this machlekes. So Rabbi Gamliel was keenly aware that he had to work very hard. He wasn't considered the greatest of the Chachamim at that time. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, who were the Rebbeim of Rabbi Akiva, apparently commanded more respect, and he was keenly aware of this. So one time when Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer had a fight, an argument, not a fight, chas v'shalom, at a particular process, whether the oven would be tameh or not, so Rabbi Eliezer could not win over the other Chachamim. And so he was running out of options here. So he says, if I'm right, let this tree fly through the sky 50 amos. And it flew. Rabbi Yeshua says, we don't paskin from trees. He says, let this river run backwards. And it ran backwards. He says, we don't paskin from rivers. He says, let the walls of the Beis Medrash collapse in if I'm right. And they started to collapse. Rabbi Yeshua says, you stay out of this. So the walls didn't know what to do, so they were curved. They said you could always go and see the shul. The walls were curved in. And finally he says, let a baskol, a heavenly voice, come out and say that I'm right. And a heavenly voice comes out and says, the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer. And Yeshua gets up and says, lo b'shamayim hi. And that's it. God, you stay out of this. The Gemara said they asked Eliyahu, what did Hashem say at that moment? And he says, my children have defeated me. I gave them the Torah. I can't change it. So they took everything that Rabbi Eliezer said was tahar and burnt it, and they put him into chayrim. Now he was married to Rabbi Gamliel's sister. So Mistama, Rabbi Gamliel was the one who had to pronounce the chayrim on him, that he was, he was out of it. And Rabbi Eliezer's reaction was tremendous. Because we know there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says that if he were to take all of the Chachamim and put them on one side, and Rabbi Eliezer on the other side, he'd outweigh them all. So Rabbi Eliezer should have said, you know what, I'm going to open my own yeshiva, like Anan ben Dovid did when he started the Karaites, went into business for himself, and say, Rabbi Eliezer, I outweigh them all. And make his own yeshiva. He didn't. He walked off the stage of history. But he was married to Rabbi Gamliel's sister. And Rabbi Gamliel's sister was worried that if he was to daven and pour out all of his sorrow to HaKadosh Baruch Hu would take it out on her brother. As it is, Rabbi Gamliel was on a boat and a storm came to sink it. And he said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I didn't do this for me or for the honor of my family's house. I did this for you so that the Torah shouldn't become two Torahs, and the storm stopped. Nonetheless, the power of saying Tachdun after Shmona Esrei is so powerful that his wife would always interrupt him at the end of Shmona Esrei so there should be a break. And one day she thought it was Rosh Chodesh and he wasn't going to say Tachdun, but she was wrong. And she turns around and sees him as saying Tachdun, the special tefillah that you can ask anything you want. And she says to him, okay, I hope you finish davening because you just killed my brother. And sure enough, they heard that Rabbi Gamliel died. But why did Rabbi Gamliel do this? To stop the machlekes. So he hears that Rabbi Yeshua was questioning his din of Kiddush HaChodesh. So he commands Rabbi Yeshua to come to me with your walking stick and your money bag in your hand on the day that you think is Yom Kippur. Now, of course, that's also from the Torah to do if it's Yom Kippur. And he was beside himself. And Rabbi Akiva's Talmud says to him, listen, if you want to rethink this calculation, you're going to have to go all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu and rethink every calculation that's ever been made. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the power to decide when Rosh Chodesh will be. He gives us that power over time. And so Rabbi Yeshua accepts it upon himself and goes to him, and in order to preserve the power of us having time. Now, today we have a calendar. But it wasn't like that in the good old days. In the good old days, two witnesses had to come and testify that they saw the moon, and they would question them. Where'd you see the moon? Where was it on the horizon? Where was the points pointing? How high up on the horizon was it? What direction was it? If they couldn't find two witnesses, then instead of the month being 29 days, it became 30 days automatically. So you understand, like in the winter, when you have cloudy days a few months in a row, it could end up throwing off Rosh Chodesh. But that's okay, because that's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. And that's not the amazing part. Listen to the amazing part. A woman has what's called a vesis, which means that she becomes a nida on the same day of the Jewish month at the same time every single month. That's how it used to be in the good old days. And you could set your watch by it. So if she was going to become a nida on Yud Gimel of the month, 13th of the month, of the Jewish month, and you have 3 months of 30 days, she's still going to become a Nida on the Yud Gimel. Because you have the power to control time. It's an astounding concept. They bring another example. I don't want to go into it, but where our ability to determine time will determine Lamaisa. Kadosh Baruch Hu will not make the day of judgment unless we decide it. And whether or not today is Pesach or tomorrow is Pesach, and there's a question of eating chametz and being chayiv kares, we decide it. And when Yom Kippur is, we decide it. We have that, but we were given that power over time. When we say Chodesh Ezeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim, it's not just telling us that Nisan is the first month. It means that we have that power. So let's look at a concept of Chodesh Ezeh Lachem in a slightly different way, just for a moment. There used to be a television show called the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. It was controversial. It was constantly getting censored because they were, even though they were Ki'ilu folk singers, but they were part of the protest movement of the 60s. They did a lot of controversial things. They made fun of politics and religion and all kinds of different things that they used to do. And they were constantly getting censored. I remember one time, they had to do their monologue. And he says, well, the censors at CBS went over our monologue to remove any references, to the president, to the Congress, anything. They go on for like 5 minutes saying everything they had to, remove from the monologue. He says, and now the monologue. Good night. So one of the characters they had was George Carlin. He used to play a character called the Hippy Dippy Weatherman. I don't know why I remember this. You remember strange things that's just lodged in your subconscious, and you can never remove anything. Yeah. Somebody wrote in on the question and answer, I've been working on my Shmiras Einayim, but how do you remove the bad things that you've seen? Everything stays in your brain. I don't know how you get it out. Maybe electric shock therapy, I don't know how, but everything stays there. You all the memories are there, and you can, sometimes through hypnosis or other methods bring it out, and people remember. Yeah, you remember everything. So does Pepperidge Farm. Because Pepperidge Farm remembers. Anyway, I don't even know if that's their slogan anymore, but when I was a kid, they had a commercial like that. But so he used to do the Hippy Dippy Weatherman. Anyway, at one point he says, I have the year-long forecast. It's going to warm up in the spring, getting very hot in the summer, cooling off in autumn, and getting cold in the winter. That's pretty good. That's the way it works. Everything begins and everything ends. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and the end. And that's how the Jewish people are as well. The Gemara in Menachos says there are 15 generations from Abraham till Shlomo, and 15 generations from Shlomo to Tzidkiyahu. So what does that mean? If you think of the moon becomes a new moon. It waxes, gets stronger and stronger until you come to a full moon. Oh, yeah. And then it begins to wane and get smaller and smaller and smaller until it vanishes. And that mirrors the Jewish people. So we began with Abraham as a tiny sliver, and we build up until Dovid and Shlomo, which is the 14th and 15th of the month, when the moon is full. That's why we have 14th and 15th Purim and Shushan Purim. Pesach comes out on the 15th. Sukkot comes out on the 15th. Yeah, it reaches its crescendo, and then it starts to go down. And so right after Shlomo, after our golden age, there's a civil war. The 10 northern kingdoms break off. And Klal Yisrael fights a number of wars. People attack us. Eventually, the northern kingdom is destroyed by Sancheriv and Ashur, Assyria. And then finally, in the reign of Tzidkiyahu, the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. The Jews go into Gullus, into Bavel. And that's the end. That's it. We're at a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what Haman said to Achashverosh. The Jewish people had a beginning, they reached their golden age, and now it's over. The Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, and it's over. The Jewish people are finished. And that's why when he made the poor, the lot, and it came out to Adar, he was happy. Says the Gemara. Why was he happy? He said, because the Jewish people began in Nisan, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, and that's the first month. So it makes sense that they will end in Adar. And that is when the Jewish people will end. And in the normal course of events, he's right. Because you hardly ever meet an ancient Greek or Roman or Babylonian or Assyrian or Hittite or Edomite. You can still find Samsonites, but they're usually in the luggage department. But all of these ancient people, they started, they built themselves up, and they collapsed and became nothing. And that's the life of kingdoms. That's the way kingdoms last. And look, we lasted 850 years in Israel till we were destroyed. That's a pretty long run. But then that was the end. And now Haman says they're finished and we can destroy them because the Jewish people are dead. And he's right, if it was anybody else. But HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem means the following. I don't know if you've ever seen a Sof Zman Kriya Shema chart for the year. It goes by the solar calendar, and it'll basically be the same time every single January 6th, March 3rd, April 20th, July 9th. It'll be the same time every single year, basically. Because the word for year is shana, which means to repeat. Again, Mishnah Torah, when Devarim is called Mishnah Torah, it means repetition of the Torah. Yeah? It's again. So every year goes around. You can make a solar calendar very easily. Yes, you're going to end up with a quarter day every year, and so every 4 years you have to add in a leap day. Okay, shkoyach. But that's not like a big deal. As we say in Hebrew, big deal. It's a little big deal. But Chodesh is from the language of lechadesh, to make it new. The new moon, the new month. You've heard the expression, the Jewish holidays are always early or late, but they're never on time. Because the Jewish calendar, our months are based on the moon. And since, as I mentioned, today we have a set calendar, but in the good old days, you had to wait for 2 witnesses to come, and based on when they came, that was going to be the new month or not. You couldn't make a calendar. Not for a month. I don't know if today is Rosh Chodesh or tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. That's what Rabbi Eliezer's wife made the mistake. She thought it was Rosh Chodesh, and it turned out that it wasn't, because these things are variable. A month is variable, which means that this month has never existed before. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, he's not just giving us control over time, he's saying, you can create a new beginning where no beginning exists. And that was the power of the Shkolim. because I collect the Chatzi shekel in Adar to use to buy the new korbanos in Nisan, and we extend it over. Listen to a Gemara. Gemara says when it came out to Adar, it says Haman was happy because Moshe Rabbeinu died in Adar. Shkayach, he was also born in Adar, is what the Gemara says. He didn't realize he was born in Adar. So what? Everyone who's born dies. We celebrate a yahrzeit. We don't celebrate a birthday. I don't care when I was born. It matters when I died. That's when the story comes to an end, when you die. Tchias Amesim, the story will pick up. But in this world, you're born, you live your life, you slowly get old, and now the end is near. I'm in the autumn of my life. Frank Sinatra song. It was a very good year. Yeah, talks about when you're young, you reach your strength, you start to fall apart. The riddle of the Sphinx. So it goes. What walks in 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs at night or in the evening? The answer is man. He starts out as a baby crawling on all 4s, and then becomes a man and walks on 2 legs, and then becomes an old man walking with a cane. That was called the riddle of the Sphinx. And that's it. You're born, you live your life, and you die. Except the Jewish people. Because all of a sudden we appear again, and we come back and we build the second Beis HaMikdash. And we reach a new crescendo. And then it begins to wane, and the second Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, and we go into Galus. And that's the end. And then we reappear in Bavel. And we have the great yeshivas in Bavel. And we reach a golden age. And then we wane, and then we disappear. And then suddenly we pop up in Spain. Suddenly we pop up in France and Germany. Suddenly we pop up in North Africa. And it ends. And we reappear. Because Jews control time. We're outside of time. We decide time. HaChodesh Hazel Lachem is not just telling us that Nisan is our first month. It's telling us we decide the month. We decide the time. And we can bring it full circle. And that's why in Adar the mazel is Dogim. What they call Pisces, the fish. And you see sometimes they draw Pisces like this. But sometimes they draw Pisces as a yin and yang. The top of one fish facing the tail of the other, and a yin and yang. And so the Gemara says, when Haman saw that it was Adar, he was happy because just like a big fish swallows a small fish, I will swallow up Bnei Yisrael. And the Gemara says, what he didn't understand is that an even bigger fish will swallow that fish. It keeps going around. There is no end to the Jewish people. When we end, we start again. Nisan is somehow the ending and the beginning come together. And so we never end. We've been beaten, we've been down, but we keep on defending. We intend to stay around because we are never ending. I'm not sure whose song that is. I'm sure somebody will let me know. Yeah, I remember it as a kid. And people would just be singing, we've been beaten, we've been down, and we keep on defending. Very powerful, powerful words. We are eternal. And so, time affects everything except the Jewish people. I'm sure I must have said this in the past at some point. There's an idea I heard from Rabbi Moshe Shapiro. It says that Rachel stole Lavan's truffim because he made them into an avodah zarah. Truffim are not an avodah zarah, but Lavan made them into an avodah zarah. What does that mean? Truffim were a divination method to be able to predict the future. But he made a religion out of that. That's why when he removed all of the recessive sheep from the flock and left him with pure white sheep and pure reddish brown goats, he knew the odds were that their dominant color was going to be there and there were not going to be variations. But somehow they kept getting born with white blotches or brown blotches or dots or around their ankles or whatever he changed the deal to, they were born that way. But it's not supposed to work that way. That's not the way the world works. I know how the world works. I'm a shepherd. But the normal rules did not apply. So he made a god out of his truffim because he was sure this is how things are going to go. I know how time works. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. This doesn't make any sense. There's something called nature. He made a god out of that. And so you find instances in Nach where the Nevi'im say we're going to change around the nature. It's going to rain when it's not supposed to rain. It'll, things are going to take place in a different way. Yoshua can make the sun stand still. So did Moshe in the Milchama with Amalek. Nature serves the Jewish people. And since we exist in time and space, time serves us. We decide what the time is going to be and how it's going to work. And the Chodesh Hazeh Lachem tells us, as we come out of Adar at the end of the year, there's a yin and yang, and we're going to go from that old year into the new year without a break. It's going to continue. Because we don't end. The Jewish people don't end. And even when it looks like we're down and out, we rebuild. Rabbi Wein tells the story that when he was in America, he went to a Judaica store. He wanted to buy a ktsois. The guy laughed at him. He said, "There'll never be a ktsois in America." He says, when they published the first one, I sent them a copy. After the Holocaust, we were done. We were done. I came to America, and that was it. I remember reading a book by a conservative rabbi about how Orthodoxy is dead. It was in the 1970s. And how conservative is the only thing that's going to exist. And today the conservative movement is on its last legs. Everyone knows it. Gasping for existence. And we've been rebuilt. Remember the words of Mark Twain when a newspaper published his obituary. And he commented, "Reports of my death have been highly exaggerated." I remember 1967. I was alive then. Everyone was sure this was the end of the state of Israel. It was only 19 years old. The Golan Heights were considered unconquerable. Egypt had the biggest air force in the Middle East. The Jordanian Legion was considered the most powerful army. The whole country was only 9 miles wide. Wouldn't take much to destroy it. And everybody was writing our obituary, and then we won. I shocked the world. And I remember somebody wrote an article at the time. It says, Now everybody doesn't like us. When we were going to be wiped out, then we had a lot of friends. Because everybody likes dead Jews. But when we survive, so some people actually were sympathetic to Jews on Shmini Atzeres when they killed 1,200 of us. But as soon as we fought back, then everybody hated us. Some people hated us even before we fought back. They were already protesting against us. Pretty scary, eh? Anyway, that's the point. So, Emir Hashem, we should appreciate the fact. Here's to new beginnings. And just remember, expect the unexpected. Or as they say in Israel, we don't rely on miracles, we depend on them. That's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can sponsor a podcast, sponsor a question and answer, sponsor a Parsha 5. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. And that's it. Until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.